The Trinity River Authority is expected to urge the Arlington City Council to accept a plan tonight that would run a sewage disposal pipeline through Arlington, Grand Prairie, and Hurst-Euless. The problem is timing. You see, at this time, the federal government will pay 30% of the more than $3 million cost of the project. However, if the state legislature approves a number of programs, the state would pay an additional 25% of the cost. If the state did join in the project, then the federal government would contribute an additional 25%. If all that happened, then the cost to the three cities would be only 20% instead of 70%. But there's a catch. If the cities do wait in hopes of getting all that extra cash, then the federal government might get tired of all the delay and withdraw the 30% it's already promised for the sewer line. The Arlington City Council probably won't take any action on the proposal tonight, but the soul-searching should be fun to watch. Jay Lewis, Channel 8 News on the Move in Arlington.
Well, the bus driver stopped to pick these three guys up, and they, it's nothing unusual about them. It's just like they're fixing to get on the bus. And they got on the bus, and they acted like they were fixing to put change in the machine. And then the one in front, I didn't see him draw the gun, but I saw it when he stuck it up to the guy's head and pulled the trigger. Right here at his neck, just stuck it up to his neck and pulled the trigger. And then the one standing behind him grabbed the money changer, and all three of them took out around the school.
Lieutenant Governor Barnes and House Speaker Gus Mutscher both say that this legislature is going to begin work faster than any other legislature in history because there is so much to be done. Speaker Mutscher has appointed some interim committees to begin work on major legislation until he is able to make the final committee appointments after Governor Smith makes his address to a joint session of the two houses in a week or two. And Lieutenant Governor Barnes says his Finance Committee is going to start looking for money at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. On the subject of committees, Lieutenant Governor Barnes says that the Dallas-Fort Worth area has the most impressive array of committee chairmanships in history.
Dallas and Tarrant counties find themselves in very strong positions as far as the makeup of the Texas Senate committees. I have called on this metropolitan area of Texas to provide some of the key chairmanship for the Texas committees of the 62nd Legislature.
There are 140 days of the regular session allocated for these men to do their work. But all observers here agree that there are going to be not just one, but several special sessions needed to get that work finished. In fact, there are many who say that these men will be working right on through October. This is Roger McDonald, Channel 8 News on the Move in Austin.
Very few high school students can actually say they know members of their own school board. Here at L.D. Bell High School, however, this week, the students are being given the chance. Today, senior civics classes are having rap sessions with school board members who have volunteered to participate in a communications experiment. School board president Johnny Eden had the first class, and he was followed by Vice President George Eberhardt. I asked school superintendent Charles Wages what he expects to be gained from these sessions.
Well, not only just the being used as resource people in reference to local government procedures and civics, but we also feel it will be an opening up of the process of relationship between an adult group of the community and our students. Many students misunderstand school procedures, therefore their attitude towards school maybe is not what it should be. So we're trying to open up the communication gap between students and the adults who are responsible for the operation of the schools.
Tomorrow, school board members will visit Trinity High for similar discussions. Eden and Eberhardt say they hope to continue the program. There was a walkout by a group of students at Bell High School the first part of this school year due to dress code set by the school board. To alleviate such problems in the future is at least part of the objective of this communications experiment. Jim Green, Channel 8 News on the Move, LD Bell High School.
The David Crockett Elementary School at 401 North Carroll is one of the oldest schools in the Dallas School District, built in 1903, long before fluorescent lighting or air conditioning were known. The Dallas School District study says that it's past due for both of them, and the man who ran that study, engineering consultant Herman Bloom, says that it would cost $89,500 for this school alone, and over $41 million for the 170-plus other schools in the district. The Dallas voters have approved the money, but at this time there's some controversy as to whether or not it really is enough. Herman Bloom appeared on News 8 at noon, and we asked him about that question.
In accordance with the Constitution and laws of the state of Texas, I declare the Senate of the 62nd Legislature in session.
With those words, Lieutenant Governor Ben Barnes opened the 62nd session of the Texas Legislature. A session that you have already heard many times is expected to be the most important and therefore the longest and most tempestuous in memory, because of the many major problems that have to be dealt with here. In the House, Secretary of State Martin Dyson Jr. opened the session and presided over the swearing-in and the election of Gus Mutscher as House Speaker. The only formal work done today in either house was procedural, but that changes very quickly, according to the leadership.
Bills will be introduced in the Texas Senate this week, and I would anticipate committee work to begin early next week, and perhaps the first bill will pass the Texas Senate sometime late next week.
Is that faster than usual?
Yes, it's faster than it was 2 years ago, of course, because I did not take the oath of office as Lieutenant Governor until the second Tuesday in January, and because of the 1 week delay before the Governor and Lieutenant Governor are inaugurated, it was some 2 weeks prior to the beginning of the session that I really started working on committees. So we're going to be about 2 weeks ahead of schedule from last year. Ability. Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, and I furthermore solemnly swear that I have not directly nor indirectly paid, offered, or promised to pay
Well, even though Dallas City Manager Scott McDonald has offered a new ordinance to the City Council on fire codes without the controversial two-exit clause, there is at least one apartment complex, this one in Grand Prairie, advertising fire safety apartments with 2 doors. This happens to be the Skyline Apartments that are managed by Mr. Irwin Smith. We took a tour of the Skyline Apartments and looked over the 2-door theory. Of course, the question of 2 exits came up back in May when Mr. Alfred Parker lost a son and a daughter-in-law in an East Dallas apartment house fire. He had been pushing the Dallas City Council for a rewriting of the codes since that time. Well, the new proposed code does not include the dual exits. We asked Mr. Smith about the 2 doors. Mr. Smith, why has Skyline Apartments taken this advertising approach?
Just to bring to the public's attention that we do have the 2-door apartments, and it's a safety feature that I think should be brought to their attention.
In your experience as an apartment manager, has the dual access been of value at any time?
I believe in the last couple of years that we have had grease fires in the kitchen, and I think that probably due to the back door we could get at the fires faster where there was very little damage.
In your opinion, do you think dual exits should be required?
I certainly do. I think that other places I have lived in years past, they have had this ordinance, and I think that it is a safety factor that should be brought to the public's attention.
Thank you very much. Well, as we mentioned about that new ordinance, it now says that only 1 exit will be required in future construction, and certainly there are many, many apartment buildings in Dallas-Fort Worth that offer dual exits. Skyline just happens to be one of them. But there is a construction feature to Skyline, which would be barred under the new ordinance. It states that the exterior balconies must be of the same construction as interior corridors, and that simply means no more wood. This is Jim Mitchell, Channel 8 News on the Move in Grand Prairie.
Enforcement standpoint, and a lot of attention is being devoted to that area of crime, and I'm sure the indictments will continue to mount.
The jewelry heist pulled here at Lynn's Jewelry last year was probably one of the largest ever pulled in the South, with an estimated $1.5 to $3.5 million in jewelry taken, depending on whose figures you listen to. According to police reports, here's approximately what happened. The men went in through the store next door. They tunneled in through the walls, breaking into Lynn's Jewelry. They then bypassed all the elaborate alarm systems in the building and on the safe and drilled into the safe, getting the jewelry. Most of the jewelry was small items, rings, watches, and so on. However, there were some large jewels that could have been broken down. At this time, there is no suspects, no leads, and no jewelry has been turned up. Carl Mayo at Lynn's Jewelry for Channel 8 News.
Finance committee that's going to start working tomorrow morning is going to be looking for places to get this supplemental money. Do you have any ideas for them other than the major tax bill that you have to work on later?
No, except the suggestions that were made in the special session 2 years ago. I still think that that kind of a tax program should be adopted, and that is a tax program that bears some relationship to the ability to pay and takes the tax burden off the old age recipients, the Social Security recipients, and people who are living on fixed incomes.
These figures may change slightly, but this is the way the crime picture looks for the year 1970 and 1969. 1970 is represented by the red line, and 1969 is represented by the black line. So you can see we were well up in the beginning of the year. We reached a peak in July of 1970, and then the decline began. That trend began to develop. And then you can see for 2 consecutive months now, we've been under the same period of last year. Now, any questions you may have?
Chief, are you prepared now to open up a new category of figures for narcotics violations?
Well, we've carried narcotics violations all along as a Part 2 offense, however. It's not considered as an index crime, and we do carry those as a Part 2 offense, and we're carrying those now.
I was thinking with the high number of indictments being returned now by the grand jury.
Well, we have had a high number, as you mentioned, and we expect that to go even higher in months to come.
Senator Mauzy, how do you view the work of this legislature now that it's underway?
Well, I think this is going to be a historic and a productive session of the legislature. I think major reform will be brought to state government.
Your committee assignment is education. There's already talk, of course, of $644 million additional new tax money having to be found. This is just to fund present programs on the books. What about your education area? Are you going to have even more money than that?
I think so. I think particularly vocational education must be expanded in Texas to provide jobs for people who need jobs, yes.